Hello and welcome to another episode of Outside the Lines, program where we talk about humans, humanity, and the things that define us, or the things we think define us. On the program today, we're going to be talking about religious freedom and its association with the First Amendment. Uh, and this is a little bit of a controversial topic. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, what's controversial about religious freedom? After all, freedom of religion is a foundational right as expressed in the Constitution. So, what's controversial about that? Well, the controversy is that there are groups of people, namely evangelical Christians, who seem to think that who believe that America is a Christian nation primarily, and that Christianity or Christian ideology should dominate all aspects of American culture and American society, including the government. In other words, they believe that there should be no separation between church and state. So, so that's the issue right there. So to discuss this with me is someone whom I have no issues with, who is my co-host, the Queen of Hair Hats, who is a goddess in her own right, Miss Renée Yaworsky.
I wanted to. I almost could keep a straight face until you said a goddess in her own right. But thank you. Although you have the beard, so you are very pious looking today. You look very monkish. I think if you had a cowl up, I would mistake you for a great monk. I might even,
I,
I might confess
I
to you.
almost wore my hood, and yeah, somebody said that I looked very Old Testament prophet with the beard, and that all I needed was a rod and a staff,
And the
or a cloak
stones.
and a staff and the
Yeah, you could have
stones.
the
Yeah.
Old Testament. Yeah, you could have the Old Testament there.
I
Yeah.
stand in the corner, and there shall be things, and the coming of things. Uh,
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for that
and
lovely introduction.
yes, yes. So, as we've discussed before, you are a Catholic, correct?
Yes,
A
yes. So let
Ukrainian
me,
Catholic.
yes, Ukrainian
So,
Catholic.
yes, which is a little bit different from
Yeah,
what we think of Roman Catholicism, uh,
absolutely. Yes.
and because there's really different branches of Catholicism. There's Greek
Sure.
Orthodox.
Mhm.
The Irish have their own
Of
ideas.
course.
Of course, the
Yes.
Romans, Spanish, and so on and so forth. Um,
Yeah, the
so
word
as a
Catholic
Catholic,
means the word Catholic means universal. So
means
it's
universal.
it's
Exactly.
found
Thank
in
you.
every single country of the world, and there's a
Right.
great,
Right.
great
Yeah.
diversity of it. Most people think, I mean, the
Yes.
Catholic Church has married priests. It has all kinds of things that people don't know about. It's just that the other rites, RITE of the church, instead of the Latin rite, don't get as much airplay. But if you are in the
Right.
East, like if you were in Ukraine right now or in Russia, that's the main. That would be the main thing. So Christian, like when people say Christian, someone like me doesn't think of evangelicals. We think of
Hmm.
Orthodox or Catholics. Those are the most people that I've kind of been around, being in New York and being around immigrant places. And of course, in the East, it's Orthodox, and then Catholics are sort of getting in there. And then, so for me, evangelicals, uh, I loved your introduction because it really paved the way for what we're going to be talking about today. For example, in Russia right now, there's a Russian Orthodox church, which
Hmm.
is getting very highly involved in the war there because they are politically motivated and controlled by the state. There are in China, they have state controlled religion, right? Which is a way of allowing people,
Hmm.
the populace, to have something that seems like religion, but actually it is controlled by the state. Your introduction was really interesting. And I think right on. I think it was very accurate when you talked about evangelicals not wanting to respect separation of church and state in America, but
Hmm.
it's only their brand of religion that they want to see controlling it. So in other words, like in
Right.
Russia, the Catholic Church has no say in Russia. It's the Russian Orthodox Church, which is owned by the communist state there, the Russian
Mhm.
state.
Right.
Here, that would be the evangelical. So it wouldn't be someone like me who was going to be that was going to be the Pope of America. It would be like what? I guess a Pat Robertson, or who are the big names in the evangelical world?
Well, Pat Robertson is, he passed
Is he
away.
passed away? Yeah,
What? So it wouldn't
he's
be him.
gone. It wouldn't be him anymore. No, I'm a
Yeah,
little bit
there,
past my
there's
time.
plenty others. Probably. I'm sure Joel Osteen would love to jump in and be the
Joel, right down the street from you.
Joel Osteen.
Go and bring him
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
studio, Manny, and let's talk to Joel. Let's see what he has to say about that.
yeah,
I have
yeah,
some
yeah,
questions for Joel.
yeah. Well, I was going to say in my introduction, but I didn't want to drag it on too long and not introduce you and our special guest today. But I wanted to say, you know, that some people might think, well, wait a minute. Christians are good people, right? I mean, they're good, decent, hardworking people. That's what they say. And I mean, Christianity is all about love and compassion and doing good works and things like that. So what would be wrong with you know them running things? What's the problem here? Well,
I have a few
first of
ideas,
all,
but yeah.
I'm sure you do, and we'll discuss that. Um, so, with that in mind, I want to go ahead and bring up our guest today. His name is Allen Coffey. He is a personal friend of mine, and as I indicated last time, he has an interesting story in that he was once a well. Tell you what, let's bring him up.
Let's bring him up. Hey, Alan.
Hey, how are y'all? I'm glad to be
Good,
here.
good.
Thank you for
Yes,
being here.
and you certainly have your beard game in the
Well,
so
thank you,
you
thank
went more
you.
for the Amish farmer look.
Well, yeah, I didn't grow the mustache out because I had the mustache in the past, and it just is irritating. And so I thought I'm just going to skip it. And besides, it makes me look if I get angry, makes me look meaner,
There you go.
which can be helpful.
Now look,
You know,
I did not. Let me tell you this. I did not plan this. I promise. I didn't move or anything. I didn't know what Alan looked like, but I want to show everybody this. I don't know if you can see this. Let me see if I can turn off this light. Can anybody see this?
Oh wow,
Yes.
yeah, I
So
can see this.
this is an Irish, you said Irish farmer. Yes, an Irish farmer who became a priest in Detroit many years ago called Father Solanus Casey. And
Uh-huh.
he looks almost identical to Alan. And he is
Yeah.
Irish. So, and he was a farmer. So I think that's very interesting.
Well,
Good query on that.
all of us Irish people, we kind of look alike, because
Well,
Coffee is an Irish name.
well, listen.
Is it?
Then,
Okay.
then we ought to be talking like this then.
Well, then we all should be talking like this, Lottie.
Yes, we should all be talking. Oh,
We need
well,
Rory
isn't that
Kendall here,
grand?
too.
That's just grand. Yeah, we should get Rory in here and do this Irish sex. Okay, but getting back to the topic at hand. So Alan, I'm sure you heard everything we've been talking about so far. So you were a Southern Baptist pastor for many years, correct?
Yes.
So
I
tell
was
us how that started and what you're doing now.
well. I started out. I was actually born a Catholic, and then I didn't go to church or anything like that. And then my parents got saved, and then that kind of evolved over the years until I ended up surrendering to the Baptist ministry. And then in 1984, I wasn't ordained. I was licensed, which is a whole different. It's a lower level. I was allowed to preach. I could even pastor a church like that if I wanted to, but they usually prefer somebody who's actually been ordained and at least been to the seminary. So I went to the seminary, got a degree, Master of Divinity on top of my college BA. And I was a pastor. I was a minister for 32 years, and I was a pastor for about 24 of those years. I was an unusual Baptist because, unlike so many Baptists around today that you hear about on TV, I believed in the separation of church and state, and I also believed in the idea that we didn't need to have the government run. I mean, the church being intermingled with the government. That was just wrong, and that was actually an old-time Baptist position. Back when the Declaration of Independence and then later on the Constitution was written, Baptists were in the forefront of religious liberty issues. They got together with Thomas Jefferson, and in fact, it was a letter to the Danbury Baptist Association that Jefferson makes his famous statement about the wall of separation between church and state, and that was what the First Amendment was about. That it was going to create a wall where the government.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Did we lose you, Alan? Did we lose Alan?
Well, there he goes.
Am I back?
He's back. Yep, you're back.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, frozen there for a minute.
Okay. Anyhow.
It might be supernatural at this point. I think we might be encountering some spiritual difficulties.
Okay,
maybe.
Well,
no,
I ended up
you're
becoming. Good. Oh, okay. So anyhow, I was always uncomfortable with the idea amongst many of my pastor brethren and church members, even, that we should get in bed with the government, because I just knew that was a bad idea. It's like I believe it was James Madison said that the government and the church exist in greater purity the less they're mixed together, and that's true, because once you start mixing those two, what eventually happens is the government ends up taking charge of the religion. They may think that they're in charge, but that never is how it works out in the end. In the end, right, the government takes over. Anyhow, that's a digression from what I was going on about. Anyhow, I was a pastor for 24 years. My last pastorate was in near Manuel in Victoria, and I was there for 18 years and 10 months. I got run off initially because I didn't vote for Donald Trump, but what they found that they didn't like about me that made them go ahead and really want to run me off is that during that process of being there for 18 years, I had deconverted and had become, I'd say this, an atheist in the closet. So I'm now an atheist. I'm also retired, so I'm getting a little Social Security there on, kind of make things move along. But I have become much more concerned about the way the church-state issue is being handled in amongst the many evangelicals out there in the world, where they feel like that, the Constitution really doesn't say that the church and the state should be separate, and that's not what they meant, and that our government, the Constitution, was written and founded on the Bible and all this sort of thing. And that's not true. That's not true. The models for the Constitution were the Roman Republic. They were the Athenian democracy, a bunch of Enlightenment issues, and that's a lie. And yet people are believing this lie about the Constitution being some kind of almost quasi-religious document handed down from God, which incidentally is an idea that came along from the Mormons. They're the first people that came up with the idea that the Constitution was divinely inspired by God, because their whole focus is on the Americas, or more exactly North America. So they believe that the second coming of Christ is going to be in Missouri, of all places. I've never been to Missouri. Well, I take that back. I have been to Missouri, but I was like 6 years old when I was there. I don't remember anything about it. But
it's a lot. It's a smaller version of Texas, basically.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's
I have
Missouri.
Missouri. It's
Missouri.
Missouri. Yeah.
Missouri.
Yeah.
I have a quick
Missouri.
question before we
Yeah.
go on. I
No, go ahead.
literally had a question for Alan. So
Sure.
because we have so many different religions represented within the United States of America, why is it that the evangelicals who are calling for an end to the separation of church and state, or arguing that it never existed in the first place, why are they so confident that it would stay within their hands?
Well, I think a lot of it is they've made alliances with particularly more. I hate to use. I say traditionalist Catholic groups. Like, how many of the Supreme
Right,
Court
yeah.
justices are some
Right.
version of Catholic, from very, very extreme to more moderate. So they have those alliances, and when you take all of the different evangelical and Protestant groups together, there are more Protestants as a single group than there are any other particular religion in the United States. For instance, the Southern Baptist Convention, I think right now they're at 13 million members in their church. Now, that's not nearly as many as the Catholic Church is, but you take that 13 million and you add the Assemblies of God, the United Pentecostals, the 100 and some odd different versions of Baptist, the Bible churches. There's a whole slew of Protestant denominations that are very, very conservative. And the conservative ones, for what growth there is going on in Protestantism, is going on the more conservative end of the Protestant spectrum, particularly amongst the charismatic and Pentecostal groups.
Would they get
not
along,
so much
though?
Baptist.
Would they get along? Would they get along though? Like if they had their vision come true and they were running the country, those groups, they agree. I'm asking an actual question because I kind of don't know. Do they agree on enough things that there wouldn't become strife and conflict later on down the road? Picture a generation or two generations down the road where one is saying, I know there's like teetotalers. I know there's people, there's different versions.
Yeah, there's different graduations of it.
Okay.
I think they get along well enough now that they could get into power. But I think what you're pointing to, I think, is a very real probability, because the only thing Protestants like more than being in charge is finding somebody to vilify and attack. It's been going on in the Southern Baptist Convention since 1979. People, you're not conservative enough. You don't believe the Bible is the Word of God, and that kind of thing. And so there's no way that coalition would last past maybe, if it made it to even the first generation.
Yeah. Okay.
It would, but you're right, because Protestants, their whole thing is splitting.
Right.
It's like this cartoon I posted here not too long ago on one of my Facebook groups, shows this whiteboard, and this guy says the Christianity through the ages, and it shows the original here, and it goes branch and branch and branch and branch and branch, and it just branches out. And finally down here in the corner there's this one little group, and it says, oh, looky here, we finally got the Bible right. We understand what God wants. That's BS.
Mm-hmm.
That you can't discount all the centuries of Christianity that came before.
They can, and they do.
Yeah, they count. Yeah,
they take out entire books of the Bible. Is my understanding. So
yeah,
they're totally fine with rewriting that. And I apologize if I'm offending anybody, and I'm still learning about Protestantism. But I was hands on for about 10 years when I lived in Georgia. The first 10 years I lived in Georgia was you're walking down the street and they would say, "Are you saved?" I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea what that meant. That wasn't any theology I had grown up with. So I'm still learning, but there is a lot of, from the Protestant friends that I've had, and many beautiful people, they do disagree on some very solid things. Like you said, it's based on splintering. So like you can have your own church in your house, right? You can be a pastor, right? Okay. So you could believe something totally different than somebody else. And so I'm not sure why it's not considered a problem. Like if I were an evangelical and I wanted my religion to control everybody in America, I would be very concerned about how long that would actually last and how many other people there were that I could even pass that torch to. So,
well, you're absolutely right to think that way, because the controlling philosophy amongst the folks who are really trying to take control of the government is called Christian either Reformationism or dominion theology. Was first put forth by I guess I can call him a theologian named Rushdoony in 3 books called The Institutes of Biblical Law. And the idea is that God wants Christians, the right kind of Christians, of course, not just any old Christians, but the right kind of Christians, to take over the government. And by taking over the government, then we take over the world for Christ. And the idea is, it goes back to it ties into another aspect of Christianity. How familiar are you with Christian eschatology? Yeah, and talking about the end times, like what's in the book of Revelation and when Jesus is going to come back.
Oh, yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, there are 3 major end times theories. One you've heard quite a bit about. That's the premillennial, premillennial, pre-tribulational rapture folks. Those are the people that read the books like Left Behind, all those books. Then there's amillennial. And then the last one is post-millennialism. Now, the other 2, the first one, premillennials, they believe that Jesus is going to come back and get all the real Christians and take them to heaven with him, and then he's going to zap the earth with a bunch of plagues and stuff like that. The second group, amillennialists, believe that the world's just going to go on, and then Jesus is going to come back, and then everything is cool. Everybody goes, they're supposed to go to heaven, it's going to go to heaven. The last group, the post-millennialists, believe that the church's mission is to change the world and make it more and more and more like heaven. And when it gets enough like heaven, then Jesus comes back and takes over and takes everybody into eternity. And what these dominion theologians, who are all Calvinists, do you know what a Calvinist is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, they believe in predestination.
Yep.
And all that.
Yeah.
They're all some version of Calvinist, because that's where the post-millennial thing came from. They believe that God has chosen them as the elect to come and make the world into a place that's good enough for Jesus to come back to, basically, which means not just America but the whole world. And
how is that? How is that related, or is it a separate thing from the what I've heard is called the 7 mountains or 7 hills theory? How are they related, or are they?
Yeah, they're very much related. They're very much related. The 7 mountains are, I can't recall them off the top of my head, but they're like communications, government, the family. I forget, there's like several others. And the idea is that Christians are supposed to take control of those 7 mountains. And in doing so, they will gain control of the country. And you see that kind of stuff going on right now. The abolition of abortion, that was one of the part of the mountain about the family and reproductive rights. It's got to be under a patriarchal lockdown system where, quote, I hate to say it like this, but where women know their place and they do what God designed them to do, which was to have kids and take care of the house and all this sort of thing. And then you see the same kind of thing going on in a different sphere against folks who are transgender and against homosexuality and people who are gay and lesbian. And it's all part of this locking it down to make America literally a Christian nation, a theocracy.
Right.
So, seven mountains fits right in there.
Yeah. Okay. Before we go on, I actually want to read, since we've kind of been talking about this, I want to read the text of the First Amendment.
Yes, please do.
This is the entire text here. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the people the right to or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So right there, right off the bat, we have basically five separate rights. Five separate rights. You okay, Alan?
Yeah, I just knocked my wife's water glass over.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
no, I'm sorry.
I was trying to.
Uh-oh.
It's okay.
Yeah, we're okay though. We're cool. I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right.
No problem. So what I was going to say is we have five different rights enumerated in one amendment. And why would the founders do that? Why would the framers do that? Well, my interpretation of this is that what all these five rights have in common is that they give to the people the right to a free and free expression and exchange of ideas without government interference.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, which on the surface sounds. I mean, that's great. You know, we get freedom to express ourselves without government telling us, no, you can't do that. But I think I've noticed that a lot of people seem to think, that, especially when it comes to freedom of speech, that it's absolute, that you can say whatever you want, wherever you want, whenever you want, and nobody can tell you otherwise. You know, you always hear it from one group or another. You know, if somebody's not allowed to speak at a some function, oh well, you're taking away my freedom, my right to free speech and all that. And no, this basically applies to the government coming in and it prohibits the government from censoring you or preventing you from speaking your mind. And also it's a way of allowing you to criticize government as well without fear of retaliation, of getting hauled away in the middle of the night for speaking out, even though people have. That has happened.
Yeah.
There have been rendition because of that. Because government always finds a way to get around even its own restrictions. But talking about the first freedom of religion, it's not a coincidence that it's in two parts, and it's the only one of these rights that are sort of in two parts. The first part says Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion. Right off the bat, it says we're not going to create a state religion because we just fought a nation that had an established religion that had we just fought this Church of England. Well, not the Church of England itself, but that was established by royal fiat. And so we're not going to have any of that here. We're going to have people are going to be free. And that's the second part of that part of the amendment, the self-expression part, and that was meant to say, we're not going to establish a religion, and you can worship however you want. You can follow your beliefs. And I think the thing is, like freedom of speech, people seem to think that right. The right to worship is again, an absolute that right to your beliefs somehow supersedes and even abrogates other people's rights. That right to worship is dominant, is predominant and superior to everything else. And that's, I think, why they don't want this separation of church and state, and why dominionism is where that is. So So how do we, I don't want to say how to combat it because, but how do we bring things back to what I think is, or what I would say is the true intent of the First Amendment, of the freedom of speech clause, that, government won't establish a religion, government will allow you to practice your religion. And also, I think what's ignored is that it very specifically says religion. It doesn't say Christianity. It doesn't say,
That's right.
Buddhism. It doesn't say any. It says religion.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And so that be inclusive. It's supposed to include all religions. And yet it only seems
That's
like
right.
Christianity that focuses on their own rights. I mean, I maybe I'm naive, but I don't hear of Jews talking about their rights being curtailed. Of course, Muslims, yes, try to curtail their rights, or Buddhists, or all these other religions. They're not on Fox News talking about their religious freedom being suppressed, and so on and so forth. And yet Christians seem to think that when the Constitution says religion, that it means them, that it means Christianity, again, because of what we talked about, that it's, that they think that it's a Christian nation because, well, the founders were Christians. I mean, and it's like you said, it's based on Christian principles and so on and so forth, even though it's not. It's based on British common law and the other things that you mentioned, Alan. So how do we come back from that? How do we prevent a theocracy?
I think the first thing you have to do, and this is the hardest part of all, because this is the foundation for everything else, you have to teach the true history of how the Constitution came to be. You've got to get rid of all this mythology that surrounds it. Like, for instance, with the First Amendment, since that's what we're talking about today, the original draft of the religious freedom part of that talked about freedom of conscience. And then it was later changed to freedom of religion because I'm not real sure. I think some of the people in the South wanted it to say that, and some of the people up north were more into freedom of conscience, and they kind of came to a compromise. Congress can't establish a religion, and it can't prevent the free exercise thereof.
Right,
and that's important because freedom of conscience is a whole different ball game than freedom to pick what kind of Christian you want to be, which is how a lot of these other folks tend to interpret that. And as an atheist, what concerns me about it is that not only is it the freedom to worship, it's the freedom to not worship.
Right.
That's important. Right. People need to be able to not worship if they don't want to. We don't need people riding around town like they did back in Boston and other places in the late 1600s, rounding up the folks who didn't make it to church. But the thing that we have to first teach that true history, and once we make it clear what the founders were really all about, Madison even says in another place that we looked at all the literally hundreds of years of religious wars that went on in Europe and said we don't want that here, so we're not going to have our government establish, or we're not going to have a federally established religion. So we have to talk about that true history, and we have to also talk about why that true history, what the context of that was, the religious wars, and the other thing. Now, the problem with that is, though, nobody likes history, unless it's, it's like the old joke in the Baptist church is history in a Baptist church is what your grandma and grandpa did. That's just, if they go back that far, that's as far back as they go. Right, and consequently, teaching history that far back and has been so distorted and so embellished and so mythologized and changed from what it really was about, that's going to be hard to shift gears. Look at Florida. I'm sure if they're telling folks, well, you can't talk about racism and slavery provided folks with tangible, useful skills that they could use later.
Yeah, beneficial skills. Yeah.
Yeah, beneficial skills. They're not going to want to talk about what the Constitutional Convention was all about and what was really going on there.
Yeah.
The other thing would be is that once you kind of establish a foundation and you clarify how it got to be there, then you have to find some way to claw back some of the stuff that has been going on. Like look at what's been going on in the Supreme Court. You know, we're providing money to religious schools in was it Maine, I believe, and we're also going to let people.
Oh.
Oh no. I bet it'll kick back on. It's the heat.
Yeah,
it's the Texas heat.
I think
it's eating all of the internet cables there. Do you want to respond to that while we're waiting?
Sure. Yeah. Well, what I want to say is, speaking about the Supreme Court, I was thinking about that recently. Just last year, the Supreme Court decided on a case that was actually based on a hypothetical situation. It wasn't even an actual thing that happened. A web designer by the name of Lori Smith, Lori Smith, I believe. She's in Colorado, and Colorado passed an anti-discrimination law, and she was worried that if a gay person came to her and wanted her to make a website to promote gay marriage, which she said she didn't believe in, that this law would force her to do something against her will. And so she took Colorado to court, and it wound up all the way to the Supreme Court. And the court decided in her favor and said, yeah, that would be discriminating against her religious rights or religious freedom. Because the state is compelling her to create, because websites are considered protected speech, under the First Amendment, freedom of speech clause. And so their ruling was, or their opinion was, that by compelling her, by forcing her to make a website that would be against her beliefs, that would be a violation of her First Amendment right of free speech, not religion.
Yeah.
They were very careful in sort of dodging that bullet by saying, well, it's not about religion, it's about freedom of speech here. Even though we know it really is about religion. But what's most disturbing to me about this, and it's going to send a very dangerous precedent, I believe, is that, first of all, this was the whole case is predicated on a hypothetical situation. Not that it did happen, but that it might happen. That's a
slippery slope.
Compelled. And so it's a slippery slope. And by ruling in her favor, it opens the door to other people saying, "What? Wait a minute. Then why should I be compelled to make websites or to do provide service to Black people? Why should I be compelled to provide service to Muslims or to Buddhists or to atheists? Or, in other words, why should I be compelled to be a decent human being and just do the job that I'm advertising?" So the Supreme Court, by making this ruling, has opened this door to further discrimination. Even though they say they're trying to prevent discrimination, actually quite the opposite has happened. Would you agree with that, Alan?
Yeah, I agree. It's built on that whole case with the guy at the bakery who didn't want to make a wedding cake for gay people because it was making him use his art and
yes, it was making use his art to do something that was against uh, uh, his sincerely held beliefs is the term that they use, um, and that's that's unfortunate. That is, and I read the I went ahead and because I was fascinated by this case, so I read the deposition, not the deposition, but the ruling. It's online and you can look it up, and it's about 70 pages worth of, and of course they bring up all the different precedents and all the different things, but bottom line is that basically what it comes down to is her right not to feel uncomfortable is somehow more important than her than doing something than basically doing her job,
Whoa.
and that's what it comes down to, and it's almost like just the idea that this entire thing, that they're ruling on hypothetical situations rather than actual real world situations. Again, I think it's setting a very dangerous precedent, and having ruled in her favor also sets a very it's exactly what Alan said. It's a slippery slope to
Yeah,
it just opens the door to further discrimination against LGBTQ people and trans people and so forth, who are already under attack.
well, it undermines the.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say it undermines the whole basis of all of our anti-discrimination laws, because if you're operating a public accommodation, then unless you decide to make it a private club, you have no right to discriminate against anybody. But now the Supreme Court says, oh well, that person believes in their heart. Oh, I believe in their heart that that's wrong, and they can't do that because it's wrong. Well, there are a lot of people who believe
I don't know if you read the yeah.
There are a lot of people who believe having black people around is wrong. It's deeply, sincerely,
exactly. Yeah, and like
I'm sorry,
I said,
you were trying to say something.
You brought up, you brought up public accommodation laws, like in Colorado, and in their opinion, they brought that up, but they were saying that public accommodation laws, when it's basically, they're saying that public accommodation laws are in themselves discriminatory because it's forcing people to act against their will, and in that way, and because of that, it's a violation of of both freedom of speech and freedom of religion, to force people to accommodate others that they disagree with or think are not, and again, those laws were made to even the playing field, as it were, to make sure that everybody I mean, that's the point of public accommodation, is that everyone is treated equally and everyone gets the same opportunity to have a service rendered, whether it's a cake, whether it's a website or whatever, without fear of being discriminated against. But now those people, the business owners or whoever, are turning that around and saying, oh, wait a minute, but what about my rights? And that's what it really boils down to, is what about my rights? I had a government teacher, and I think I told you this, Alan, but I had a government teacher who said that your level of discomfort with what, a law or whatever, is based on whose ox is getting gored, meaning, who is it hurting the most, and if you're okay with a law that is, hurting somebody else but not you, that you can say, well, it has something to do with me, that somebody else else's ox is getting gored, then that's fine. But if it's yours, then all of a sudden says, oh well, now I care because now it's affecting me personally. And so this lady felt like her ox was getting gored, and Supreme Court apparently agreed. Like, yeah.
Well, something else too that is kind of the white elephant in the room, if you will, is the fact that all these people are white straight Christians.
Yeah.
White straight Christians. They probably are even that subscribe to what I call the red state MAGA fascist philosophy. That God created white people to rule everybody else, and
So
I can't be.
All the hate mail right over here. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I said it. Let's go viral.
Go ahead.
But
this is going to be a TikTok.
Yeah, that's the elephant in the room, and with the exception of the very well compensated Clarence Thomas, all the people who voted for that on the Supreme Court are straight white people.
Right.
He's the only person of color, but he's friends with all these billionaires and people giving him money. So that he's decided what side his bread's buttered on, and it's not on the side of the regular folks and people of color like himself. And what this all boils down to, and what all this, in my opinion, is, all this stuff is a vehicle. The whole attempt to override the religious freedom and all this in the United States, it's a vehicle for white supremacy and, red state MAGA fascism, white supremacy, to come along and take over the government. Because if you look at what the nature of fascism is, this covers all the bases. You got glorious past that never really existed. You've got the whole, we've got to purify and make America great again. We've got the whole, white people built this country and we need to support them. They got that there, and all these other people are parasites, or, all this bullshit, excuse my language, that comes out from all these supposed Christian people against other people, and denigrates them and makes them look, like they're subhuman.
Right. Yeah.
It's disturbing on so many levels, because it's not just about removing religious freedom. It's using removing religious freedom as a vehicle to bring in something worse, which is fascism. So I guess I get all the hate mail now.
No. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I wasn't sure if I should bring that up or not, and I'm glad you did. But yeah, it does seem like it's driven by, as you said, white male, specifically male as well, white male, straight Christian conservatives are the ones pushing this particular agenda, and of course they like to twist it, and demonize the other side, demonize the left. Saying, well, I saw, oh my gosh, I saw a presidential candidate, this male, but he is of Indian descent or Pakistani descent, I believe. And I don't even want to mention his name because I want to give him any airtime or whatever. But he was giving a speech on TikTok. He was addressing his followers or whatever, and it was going on and on and on about how the left was suppressing the rights of people, the freedom of speech. You can't say things anymore without somebody telling you can't, and you can't say this, you can't speak your truth, and you can't do this and you can't do that. And I'm thinking, wow, you want to talk about bullshit? Yeah, and I kind of wish I'd saved it and showed this. Even though, again, I don't want to give this guy any more, legitimacy, because he is far right. I mean, wow. But and I was thinking about this. It's like, no, no, dude, you're here on this major platform, and you're saying all this stuff, and nobody's coming after you. Nobody
Yeah.
is busting in your door and dragging you away for saying what you said. What they mean is that, see, when they talk about, our rights are being oppressed or whatever, what they really mean is they're getting called out for what they're saying. They're getting called out for their bigotry. They're getting called out for their racism. They're getting called out for their homophobia. And they don't like it. They don't like
Mm-hmm.
it when people
They want there
speak
to be
up and
no
say, hey, you know what?
consequences.
Exactly. And see, that's what I was saying earlier about freedom of speech, people thinking that it's absolute. No, it's not. There are consequences. There's a famous saying or a famous situation where about, is it ethical or is it even legal to shout fire in a crowded
Mm-hmm.
theater, which is actually a misquote from something that Oliver Wendell Holmes said when he was giving an opinion on a case. And it's actually kind of a pro censorship statement, but I'm reinterpreting it and saying that no, it's not. It may not. It may be legal in a sense that, again, it is freedom of speech. However, it's not right. It's not morally right. If you want to talk about morals, because what you're doing is when you say something like fire or shout fire in a crowded theater, you're putting people's lives in danger, in literal danger. And that's the limits right there. That is the limit of free speech, is when you put people's lives in danger, when you put people in harm's way by your speech, then yes, other people have the right, again, because of the same amendment, to say, hey, wait a minute, you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they don't like, is being told that they're wrong.
That's right. Yeah.
Because right wingers and conservatives in general, at least in my experience, all the ones that I've ever encountered, always seem to think they're right, that their opinion is the correct opinion, and anybody else's opinion, well, is obviously wrong. And so when you point out to them, well, wait a minute. First of all, why do you think this way? And second of all, I don't think that's right. And not only do they kind of recoil at that, they actually think it's an attack. They actually
Mm-hmm.
call it an attack. Oh, you're attacking my point of view. You're attacking, me. This is an attack on, or they'll couch it, it's an attack on freedom. It's an attack on. No, it's not. It's just a rebuttal. It's just saying, hey, you know what? Maybe you're not right about this opinion. Maybe you're not right that homosexuals are deviants or out to molest your children, or groom your children, or the drag queens, or drag queens are grooming your children to whatever, or allowing somebody who identifies as a female into the bathroom of the sex they identify with, is somehow allowing pedophiles into bathroom. All this mythology. It's boogeymen scare tactics, again, to attack the LGBT community, to attack trans people, for the reasons that you stated earlier. It's a way of bringing things back to what people of religious peoples think is what they call biblical truth.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
Yeah.
that's and you're right. Education is always what's necessary to combat these sorts of things. But when you have a situation like you mentioned, Florida, where the people who are perpetuating those mythologies and perpetuating those stereotypes, we just talked about stereotypes in our last episode, and of the pedophilic, gay person, or all this other stuff, or fighting against wokeism and all this stuff, and they control DeSantis or his legislature passed that law that middle school teachers had to teach that slaves had it good, basically. That hey, they learned a skill, so slavery wasn't all bad. How dare you? That sort of thing. And so when actual education, when facts become secondary to this agenda, and they always say, well, we're fighting the liberal agenda. We're fighting the liberals are trying to, make our children gay and all this other nonsense. No, it's just an excuse. That's just an excuse to push their agenda of subverting the truth, of subverting facts, and the actual history of this country. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you that education is the way forward, but how do you get that when people are subverting the very idea of education? You have these moms for freedom, or liberty rather, which is another horrible misnomer, who are trying to get books banned, and they're going around saying that wow, it's our kids are being indoctrinated with all this stuff, and people who've never been in a classroom in their lives, and who have no idea what actual teaching is about, Well,
one of the things I was going to bring up earlier that I didn't get around to as I got sidetracked was, even though education is essential, I don't see any way in the political climate we're in right now, and with the Supreme Court the way it is, and the legislatures of so many of the states being controlled by the right wing, I don't see any way that's going to happen. Which it's like we're in a stasis. We can't go forward, but we can sure go backwards.
Yep.
And that's what we seem to be doing, going backwards.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you talk about mythology, and conservatives, by and large, seem to be stuck in this idea of, like you said, this, the good old days, and mainly, somewhere between the 30s and the 50s seems to be their golden age. When again, white male, straight Christian conservatives were the dominant, the dominant force in politics and society. And really, I think a lot of this issue is less about religion and more about concentrating power. It's all about concentrating power and focusing that power to the benefit of a relatively small segment of society, whether it's economic power, whether it's religion, whether it's whatever you want to call it. It's all about consolidating and concentrating that power with one group, and the fact that they don't see that history hasn't taught them a lesson of how dangerous that is, both in terms of what happened, in Germany in the 30s and 40s, or what happens in the Middle East right now, where religion is. And that's the other thing, these are the same people who are just, always screaming about Sharia law. We don't want Sharia law, in this country, and all this stuff, and how terrible that is, and all. But they seem okay with biblical law, No,
that's because biblical law is true. That other stuff is false, and that's exactly what they're thinking in their mind. Christianity is a real religion, and all those other ones are demonic religions. falsehoods
Exactly.
taught by demons.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
of course, they're going to want their own version. And
Yeah.
if you think everything is in that black and white and that's black and white of a format, of course you're going to want your religion to be the main one.
Yeah. And I think that's, I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think that is the main issue right there, is this black and white thinking. It's either or. It's either this way or this way. The old saw about, my way or the highway kind of thing, and that's what they want. They want their way to be predominant. Okay. Renee, where'd you go? Are you there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Absolutely.
I'm
still
here.
here.
Renee went.
Yes, I'm here. I had a
Yes,
question
yes.
for Allen about his journey. Allen, you said you were a pastor, a Southern Baptist pastor, and you were sort of in that fold until you didn't vote for Trump. What was that like, and why did you not, when you were surrounded by people? Like, why was your journey different, and why were you able to identify Trump as one way when the people or the culture that's surrounding you is another way?
Well, I think it all started when President Obama was in office. People at my church did not like President Obama. I voted for him twice, because part of my journey to where I ended up being an atheist was, first I became a Democrat because I had in 2006. I don't know if y'all remember what was going on back then, but the Republican Party had a whole series of sex scandals. And their party leadership was covering up these people in Congress that were, behaving in a predatory fashion. Well, that kind of got me concerned, because they claimed to be the party of family values. And so I started doing a little research, and I figured out that really all was going on there was the Republicans were playing the family values card as a way to cover up for the fact that what they really were doing was giving away the farm to all their rich donors. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I crossed that bridge. So I haven't voted for Republican since before 2006, when all that stuff was going on. Then I crossed another bridge in 2010 when I realized I didn't believe in God anymore. So I spent 6 years as a pastor. Basically, I hate to say it because it makes me sound like a really bad person, but I had my parents in the nursing home and stuff, and I needed to have, a job, that I was undercover as an atheist. I got up and preached Southern Baptist sermons every day and did Southern Baptist stuff, but I was not a Southern Baptist in my heart. And so when I saw Trump coming up, it's like, I already, even if I'd still been a Christian, I knew Trump was bad, because I'd been watching him since the 80s.
Right.
And I knew he was a bad man. Mm-hmm. And he basically ticks off all the box for the biblical Antichrist. If you go back and you read the Bible and look at what they talk about the Antichrist, Trump, that's why I call him the Orange Antichrist. Yeah. And I couldn't believe all these people were going to vote for him. And I kept talking to people. Oh, yeah, Trump. Trump's like, why? Well, he's God's man, and God chose him, and all. It's like, what? Mm-hmm. And what finally, just before I got fired, I had a guy at the church took me aside, a deacon, and he said to me, look, preacher, we know you don't like Trump. Nobody cares what you think. Nobody cares what you've got to say. If you don't vote for Donald Trump, even if you don't actually cast a ballot for Hillary Clinton, you're voting for Hillary Clinton. And that makes you a baby killer. And we don't need a baby killer around here. So, and then he went on to regale me with how all the bigwig Southern Baptist Convention were supporting Trump, and the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Dallas loved Donald Trump, and blah, 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 blah. So that in the process of that, they got to digging around in things I was doing on my off time, and found out I did a pagan wedding for some friends of mine here in Victoria. and that got him on the trail to me being an atheist, and that got me fired.
Mm.
And until I retired officially this, November, first part of December, I couldn't find a job. I was unemployed for like 6 years. Just kind of scraping by, doing odd jobs and begging people for money. But anyhow, that whole thing, I didn't like Donald Trump in the 80s, and I watched him as he committed adultery with his second wife on his first wife, then committed adultery on his second wife with his third wife, committed adultery on his third wife with a variety of porn stars and such. And it's like, no way. I mean, I can remember when people were saying when Bill Clinton was in office, saying, oh, well, if he's not faithful to his wife, how can we trust him to be faithful to our government? I'm like, okay, so you're going to vote for this guy. I mean, the guy, said on air, had that tape of him grabbing women and stuff. And it's like, I'm sorry, that's, even if I was still a hyper fundamentalist, Jesus person, there's no way in hell I was going to vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah, Donald Trump he was noted in the 80s. I mean, he was sort of the go-to, almost cartoonish villain who would be an unethical, immoral person. Definitely not anyone who would be a Christian. I don't even know if I think he identifies as a Methodist or something, but that's a joke to him, right? I mean, he's not noted. It's not just about him sinning or whatever. It's about the fact that he's not even Christian. He doesn't believe in Jesus. It's not like he changes his life because of it's not like he's there reading the gospel
he follows a lady named Paula White, but he never goes to church. And when he was asked one time about how it felt to be forgiven of all of his sins, he said, well, forgiven of my sins, I've never done anything wrong.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he lacks the basic, the basic tenets of how to get into the religion. So. Yeah.
So I just like I said, I've been watching Trump for a long time, and I realized he was bad news. And as I saw the people that seemed to be, forming up around him, all these neo-Nazis and Klansmen and the Proud Boys and all these other far right-wing folks, where he was, because he was spewing this stuff out, it brought it into the mainstream and suddenly made it okay for your local Joe Blow Republican to believe that stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, like the Republican Party around here, it's just a nightmare. They believe all that crazy stuff, and they love Donald Trump. They want him. They want him to be president again. Yeah. And that's I've been watching him for a long time, and when I realized that he was actually going to be the front runner in the Republican nomination and became president, like, no way in the world am I going to vote for him. Mm-hmm. After he got elected, I had a woman in my church come to me after a Sunday morning service. This was before I got fired, and said to me, Pastor, next Sunday we need to have a morning worship service where all we do is go down to the front and pray and thank God for Donald Trump because he gave us a second chance. And I'm like, what? Mm-hmm. Are you serious?
Second chance at what?
A second chance at I guess expiating the sin of having Obama as president is kind of what I read into it.
Yeah. The dog whistle. There's a lot of dog whistles.
Yeah, one of the dog whistles, because unless you were actually hanging around with evangelical folk back then, it's hard to explain how anti-Obama they really were and still are. They view Joe Biden as basically Obama's hand puppet. He's really running the show. But I mean, I had one old man at my church. He'd tell me every Sunday, he said, I'm still looking to find that Obama, that he's the Antichrist. I haven't found him yet, but I haven't quit looking neither. Okay. Hey, you do you. I was like, what do you say to that?
Yeah.
Because he was convinced, and a lot of other people I had people come to me right after he got elected saying to me, Pastor, I've never been so scared in my life of this man who's now going to be president. And I'm thinking, why are you scared of him? I thought, oh, wait, you're a racist. And you're scared because you're afraid he's going to treat you like white people treat black people. Oh, it's a size. I understand now.
It's projection. It's projection.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's and you see a lot of that.
Yeah.
But did I answer your question, Renee?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
Renee, would you go ahead and run that video? I want Allen to see this.
All right, here we go.
Well, I don't know. I guess it all depends on what happens in this imaginary meeting.
As an atheist, I get this question a lot, which is what happens if you stand before God one day or Jesus comes and you know in that moment that you were wrong? And I think what Christians are wanting me to say is, I was wrong, I knew it all along deep down, I just wanted to sin, or church was boring, and you guys were so right, because Christianity at the end of the day, it wants the world to end, and it wants vindication that they were right. It is a huge driving force of this religion. But I don't think that's what it's going to be like. If Jesus came down and he's the one who says, that the last would be first and the first would be last, I think the people who left religion because they couldn't stomach child sexual abuse or corruption or dogmatism, I don't think that Jesus would condemn that. What he condemned was hypocrisy. He condemned bureaucracy, and he condemned using religion as a way to bully people and thinking that you're better than most people. Most atheists actually know more about religion and Christianity than the average Christian. This is shown true poll after poll. So if I, an atheist who struggled with the integrity of my church institution, and I'm out here in the wilderness trying to do the right thing just because I'm a human and you're a human and I'm connected to everyone else and everything, not for heaven, not for a reward, not able to use the sacrifice to wipe away any moral responsibility, I have to take care of that, then from what I know from my theology degree from a Christian school is that I think atheists are going to do just fine. I think atheists and Jesus could hang out pretty well. So I'm actually a fan of Jesus coming down. It doesn't bother me at all. I use zero sleep that there's a possibility that this could happen, even as an atheist, even as someone who's left Christianity, because if anything that was written about Jesus is true, then he wouldn't be a fan, Jesus wouldn't be a fan of what Christianity has done with his name. And I would stick around to see that without fear of burning in hell, because all of the good Jesus stuff, the heart of the law rather than the letter, the love, the softness to the marginalized and to children, I took all of that with me. And in some ways, you can only really understand Jesus when you are looking at the institution from the point of view of the wilderness, because that's where Jesus was.
So what do you think? Do you relate to that? Is that part of your experience as well?
I can
fundamentalist.
I can certainly relate to that. I wouldn't. My personal experience is not quite like that, because I kind of came out through a different route. I tend to be more rationalistic towards my experience of religion and what it does, and I kind of see it more from the perspective of a lot of the things are objectively just not true. The things that, particularly in the Old Testament, when it talks about, you shouldn't eat fish and shouldn't eat fish, and there aren't a certain, all the dietary laws and stuff like that. But I can certainly relate to that, because there are definitely some things Jesus says and does that are very much not typical for a first century person, particularly a first century Jewish rabbi, because at that particular time period, they were very much about making sure they followed the law. The Pharisees, in particular, were fixated on following the 613 commands of the law, because they knew from their history that's how they got in trouble, is by not following those laws. And then, from their perspective, God came down and smacked them down every time they didn't do that. So they got fixated and became legalistic and hard-hearted and cold towards anybody who was not Jewish, and towards their brother Jews who didn't adhere to this kind of rigorous sort of behavior. It's not at all. It's not really any different than what you see with a lot of evangelicals today and other folks that would be listed as fundamentalist or traditionalist on the scale of religious leanings, because there's that need for certainty. You know, they have to. They have to absolutely say this is true. Nothing else can be true. Going back to the black and white thinking that we talked about earlier. But yeah, you know, I have a great deal of sympathy for poor people. In fact, that was one of the things that this guy who took me aside and dressed me down about not loving Donald Trump had against me, is he said, "You care about poor people, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I do care about poor people. I don't care about poor people. They're getting just exactly what they deserve." And I said, "Well, where did you find that in the Bible?" And he said, "Well, you know, they're just all worthless and immoral." It's like, okay, that's not what the Bible says, but you know, I guess, you know, I disagree with you, and I kind of left it at that. But that goes back to another theme, that I hate bullies. I dislike, I hate, I oppose bullying. And when you get right down to it, when you dig through all the layers of conservative politics and conservative religion and the way they try to, you know, act it out in society, it's all just glorified bullying. I'm going to use my holy book and this list of rules that I don't follow quite as well as I probably should, but I'm going to make you think I do. And I'm going to use that to bludgeon you over the head and make you feel bad, and possibly, and if I can ruin your life, I will, because you deserve it. You're a sinner and you're going to go to hell anyway. And there's not a lot of love there. There's a lot of legalism, a lot of intimidation and bullying, and just hard-hearted, mean-spiritedness.
Yep.
You know, the whole time I was a pastor, one thing that always struck me about both the churches I pastored, the one I pastored for 4.5 years and the one I pastored for 18 years, was how little compassion and sympathy those people had for anybody that was different than them or was poor. I don't know how many times I'm going to phrase it this way, but because it's, yeah, I got stuck with the poor person because nobody else wanted to deal with them, and I ended up giving them my money, or taking them and putting gas in their truck with my money, or, you know, all this kind of stuff. The church just kind of, well, we don't have time for those kind of people. I even had another preacher tell me that one time. We just don't have time for those kind of people. I don't have time for them. I said, well, you know, isn't that kind of what we're supposed to be? No, I just don't have time for them. If they can't tithe, I don't want anything to do with them. Okay, well, know where your heart is, bro. And that was before I even had, you know, I had failed out on the Republican Party and become an evil, gray, twisted atheist. Think that'll go viral? Oh no.
Oh,
but yeah, so many things that could, you know, kind of be used for good can be twisted around and used as a bludgeon to bully people. And that's one of the things that bothers me about all forms of religion, no matter whether you're talking about Christianity.
Uh-oh. Well,
he'll be back in a second, I'm sure.
Yeah. So what do you think, Renee? What's want to chime in here?
I'm sorry.
Oh, he's back. Allen, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you were talking about how how people were not being like genuine Christians. In other words, actually following the teachings of Jesus, but rather this whole other thing, which has nothing to do with actual Christianity.
Yeah, because did y'all hear the part where I was talking about that they didn't want to help people?
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't want to give money
Yeah.
to the poor, or didn't have time for it. We don't have time for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they didn't
what's
wanna have-
especially telling is when this person said that if they're not tithing, I'm not interested.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how much clearer is that it's all about, it's all about the money. It's not even about, saving souls or whatever it is that, they're preaching. Oh, you're going to say that you have a problem with the problem you have with pretty much all religions.
Yeah. They can all be twisted and used like that, like a bludgeon. Doesn't matter
Yes.
what religious denomination of Christianity, what denomination of Christianity you're in, or what other world religion, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Shintoism, any animistic type religions. They can all be twisted around and used as a bludgeon against people that are marginal in the society. Like, look how many people who are tried and convicted as being witches in the Middle Ages and even in colonial America. Most of those folks were very marginal type people that folks didn't like or trust because they said, "Ooh, look at that old nasty smelling woman over there." Ugh. That kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't like. I mean, you can use a lot of things to bully people, and economic inequality is a form of bullying. Politics is a form of bullying. Government can be a form of bullying. All those things can be forms of bullying if used by people who are just that mean spirited and want to keep control of things. And I have no use for bullying. And these folks we were talking about earlier, freedom of religion's been turned into a club to bully people with.
There you go.
These people are saying, "Oh, I can't even think about making a website for a person who's a homosexual." Okay, so I'm going to get the Supreme Court to say I don't have to because I believe it's wrong. That's bullying people. The guy with the cake was bullying people. Yeah, the foot coach with the praying with the football team at the 50-yard line, bullying the people. It's one of those things. It's like they say, well, they don't want to. They don't have to go down there. Yeah, they kind of do if they want to have any kind of place in the organization. They have a stigma attached to them if they don't. It's just bad. Or people who are atheists, they get bludgeoned and bullied all the time by religion and other forces in the society.
Right. Yeah. So the bottom line is, be kind.
Yeah.
Be kind.
Don't just rewind. Be kind. Just don't rewind.
Don't rewind to the 1950s.
Or the 30s,
or before that. I think that is, and it's unfortunate. The true, and I was telling somebody earlier in the week when we kind of got into this discussion, I said, and I think even the lady in the video said Jesus would, if he came back, would not recognize Christianity.
I definitely agree with that.
Wait a minute, this is not what I taught you folks. As a matter of fact, I didn't even want to create a religion. I'm Jewish. I just wanted my fellow Jews to be better people. That's what he meant by my people. And that's all. And I gave you some fundamental things that you could say, well, okay, this is going to make you a better person. All this other stuff. Why'd you drag all this other, all this dogma and stuff into it, and so my question to you, Mr. Allen, is this, and I know you're an atheist, and I know you don't believe in all this other stuff, but do you think it's possible that someone can believe in or can actually follow the teachings of Jesus without necessarily being part of a church, being part of any kind of group. And would that actually be a better thing than being part of a formal Orthodox religion?
Well, I would point. Well, I would point you to Thomas Jefferson's redaction of the Gospels, what's often referred to as the Jefferson Bible, where he goes through and cuts out all the supernatural stuff and leaves all the moral teachings and such in there. I think, yeah, it's possible, because I think, as flawed a person as Jefferson was, he didn't just do that for yucks. And, he did that because he was seriously interested in trying the best of his, lights to be a better person. And I think it's possible. I think particularly if you cut out the supernatural stuff, if you just go for because Jesus, he does recommend a lot of really, really good things. He's again like the lady in the video said, he's against hypocrisy. He's for being kind to people who are poor, people who are sick, people who are children. He's for being generous to other folks, particularly those who are without. All things that I don't think our world could ever have too many people who are generous and kind. We seem to have a real shortage of that kind of stuff these days, particularly with, as the New Deal has been wearing off over the last 40 years, and we're getting more back to the whole Gilded Age kind of mentality of the 1870s, 80s, and 90s, and early 1900s prior to the New Deal. That's kind of where the Republicans ultimately want to take us. They don't want to just take us back to the 50s. That's where all their little followers want to go. They want to go all the way back to where the vast majority of the country was poor. Middle class was minuscule, and the rich people even more minuscule, but they had virtually everything. But I think a person, if they seriously applied themselves to following the non-supernatural parts of the teachings of Christ, particularly things like a Sermon on the Mount and other things.
Yeah, the Beatitudes.
They could definitely be a better person, and they wouldn't need to go to church to do that. Interesting fact about the Sermon on the Mount. When I was a pastor, I preached through that. It took me, it took me several years to get all the way through it, because I went through it one verse at a time, and a lot of folks didn't like that because they were, we want to hear what Paul has to say. Paul, he's more important. It's like, well, this is Jesus. This is the guy who died on the cross for you talking. Don't you think we ought to?
Religion is named for?
Don't you think we ought to pay more attention to him than maybe to, Paul? Paul is just commentary.
That's an interesting point you bring up. And I think that's where it kind of all went wrong, is that it seems like the religion itself is based more on these extra canonical things or extra gospel than on the actual teachings of Jesus. It follows more the dogma of, like you said, Paul and the letters and all of that stuff, rather than what Jesus was talking about. Because what Jesus was talking about is actually kind of uncomfortable to people who feel like again, it's about power. And Jesus was saying, wait a minute, no, let's take some of that power away and give it to use or not take it away, but use that power, use your wealth, use your influence to help other people instead of just helping yourself. When the rich man asked him, how do you get to heaven? How can I get to heaven? And Jesus tells him, sell all you have and give it to the poor. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, really? That's it? I don't know about that.
A Baptist preacher wouldn't have done that. A Baptist preacher would have said to him and said, you got a lot of money. Come on down, and if you tithe and give special offerings and continue to be the good person you clearly are, I think we can work something out here. Just tell, just say, Jesus is my Lord and Savior. Let me baptize you, and believe that He really is your Savior. We're good to go.
Here's your ticket.
We're good to go here. Yeah,
here's your ticket.
And that always struck me, because every place in the Scripture where you see somebody quote getting saved, it's never ever like what goes on in any Baptist church I've ever been in, or any evangelistic meeting I've ever been to. There's no quote sinner's prayer and all this kind of stuff. It's very vague and kind of ambiguous most of the time in terms of what your typical evangelical is looking for.
Right, exactly.
So and that was kind of one of the things that, as I was thinking about my faith and stuff in light of a lot of other things, that made me step back. And also, the fact that something that started with one guy and one leader and 12 followers, and a few other folks that hung on with them, turned into the monstrosity that it can be and often is today.
Yeah. All right. I think with that should be our final word. Renee, where you at?
I'm right here. Yeah, we went an hour and a half, and I felt like there was so much more we could be talking about. This is the stuff I love talking about, by the way. This is how I love spending my life. This is my favorite type of conversation. I do this with a lot of my friends, and I find it very interesting. I read a lot of books about this type of stuff, so I found it very engaging, and I learned a lot because one of the things, like I said, I have a void in is like Southern Baptists, and so I learned a lot, Alan. And I got your friend request, so I connected with you, and I'll be in touch with you again so that we can learn even more.
Yeah. I'd love to come be on your show again sometime.
Oh, absolutely!
Excellent.
I was just going to say that.
We have so much more to say.
Talk about other things. I mean, there's so much other stuff we can talk about. It doesn't have to be, serious. I mean, it's. I always wanted this program to also be, entertaining, and we have for entertainment purposes as well, not just these heavy, heavy topics. But
you guys were very entertaining. I will tell you, you were both very entertaining. So you achieved.
Thank you.
Absolutely did.
Yeah. So,
but you'd be really entertained to see the little sideshow that's been going on back here with the dogs.
I was wondering your little dogs. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I had mine. I was gonna let my little dog run around, but I thought no, I'm gonna put her up. Because otherwise she likes to be, all here. So,
well, my producer Spike over here has been taking care of the stuff for me. And Spike is my wife, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yes, thank you, Spike.
Yes.
Awesome.
I enjoyed being on here.
Yes,
we enjoyed having you. Absolutely, and there's other shows too on Cosmos too. So I'll reach out. I'm pretty sure there are different people who would probably like to highlight you and your journey. You have a really interesting personal journey, and you're very well versed in history and politics and culture and religion. So it's like endless, right? There's so many things.
Yes, it is. And I like this kind of format.
Get ready to be a star.
Very good. Yes. So get ready to be a star. Get on your Shirley Temple. Get your jazz hands ready. Yeah, there you go. On the good ship, Allen. There you go.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So, all right. Well, again, thank you very much. Thank you to our audience. I believe. Well, I'll let Renee tell us what's coming up next.
Yes, we have Burn It Down Positive. On the channel? Yeah, next on the TV guide, right? So right after this, we're going to have Burn It Down from Puerto Rico and from North Carolina, because CJ Peters, CJ Sunshine, I should call him, who was also in the audience earlier. So hi, CJ. He will be there, and Tom and I and CJ are going to have a Burn It Down Positive party. And we're going to talk about, what it's like, because CJ Peters is this incredible sunshine. He is sunshine. He's very positive, and there's so much darkness in the world. Trust me, if anybody's struggling with anything, tune in for Burn It Down after this. And it's impossible to not be happy when you're around CJ Sunshine. So that's what we'll be doing later tonight.
There you go. Yeah. Next week, well, I'm sure we'll have another episode of Outside the Lines.
We
Haven't
have a
come up with a
lot on the
topic yet.
docket. Oh, but we have we have a short list. We have a short
We
list.
have a
We're good.
we have a short list. So
Mhm.
so stay tuned for that. And our regular show, Two Guys and Sometimes a Gal Talking About Movies, will be back in September when Mr. Rory Penland, when he comes back from his vacation or off time or whatever you want to call it. And so there's lots and lots of good stuff creative. So
Yes,
thank you, everyone.
absolutely.
Thank you, Alan, and
You're welcome.
we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And yes, they're reminding us. Yes, Fred and CJ, thank you. Yes, it's coming on right after this at 9 p.m. Eastern time. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.